I get a ton of mail from people within the state of California. We get mail from all over the place, but in the state of California, this seems to be a common problem. And it's not just limited to you all. I have the same issues. Just so happens I decided I would address it today. There's a lot of you that are saying, I just don't know if I can stay here in California. And for the listeners who don't live in the state of California, just to kind of give you an idea, we probably have some of the most convoluted, worst policies for everything. Not just one singular dimension of our life, but if you try to have business here in California, they make it almost impossible. Our taxes here, everything, you name it, made incredibly difficult if you want to do anything here, all right? And then the cost of living here is off the charts. You've got people flipping hamburgers making $21 an hour, which if you don't live in California, you just would kind of say, I'm moving there. The problem is you get paid $21 an hour, and people are no longer hiring full-time workers to do those jobs. So even if you're making that $21 an hour, most people cannot afford to pay rent. Just rent, not owning a home, just paying rent. The state is obviously, you'd have to be living under a rock to see what's happened to the north of us. San Francisco, a once incredibly picturesque and beautiful city, has turned into rot. And all you've got to do, please, if you don't have to go there, don't go there, okay? But, you know, do a little searching online. You've got pockets of San Francisco that look like the zombie apocalypse and I kid you not, that's not to be funny. You've got people who are literally so drugged out on the street, cannot stand up straight. The disproportionate amount of people who are fentanyl, etc., abusers, whom the state, by the way, enables by providing drug paraphernalia and, in some cases, free drugs. So it's made a problem for a lot of people. It's probably also contributed a little bit to our problems here at Faith Center, where people just kind of sit on the fence and say, how long can I stay here before I have to leave? If you're a person who understands the type of incredible finances that it takes to live here, all you got to do is look up what an average home here, if you can find a home for $500,000, and compare it to a home, say, in Arizona or Las Vegas for the same amount of money. And we're talking about, now I'm just making this to make this ludicrous concept understood, we're talking about basically a matchbox in California versus what used to be a home for, let's just say, a family of 4 or 5. And it's so disproportionate that there are a lot of people just confused about what to do. Let me just tell you, and I speak to you as honestly as I can, there are things I keep to myself because it's probably not appropriate to say from the pulpit. But, you know, I've said this before, if it wasn't for the church, the physical church, I too would leave the state. I love the state of California, okay? There's nowhere else that you can go to see the most picturesque, beautiful oceans and beaches and mountains. You like the snow? Just drive a little bit. You want the desert? Just drive a little bit. We've got some of the most incredible parks. And I mean, the state is a wealth of beauty and resources, but unfortunately, it's been mismanaged to hell. And by the way, this should be put as a note to self that people who have basically used this state to enrich themselves, which, by the way, it starts with the governor of California, and just work your way around that circle to see where the money is. I don't know how you are governor of California as a public civil servant and basically have a net worth of over $50 million. Not sure how that works, folks, But like I said, I'm just talking to you like we're all in this problem because we all live here. And then I have folks that write and say, I want to move there, I want to be close for service. Hey, listen, I'm not going to tell you to come, and I'm not going to tell you to stay, all right? Because I too have these issues where I just think to myself, at what point does it get to be, what do you do? But in my case, I have one singular thing that I have to keep in mind. While everybody who doesn't have the responsibility, I do. That means that there has to be a church, some dimension, some form of a church, while everybody else may be fleeing the state. So it makes this incredibly challenging for me because I realize that I'm trying to solve a problem with this church, and many of you are in the same mindset that I've just mentioned, which is this kind of vacillating difficulty. I'm going to say this to you. My faith says I must do the best that I can to keep the mooring here, all right? And that's why I'm telling you as a congregation, it's very easy to just run away. That's the easy thing, to quit, to run away, to give up. And you might say, well, how can I make things work here? Well, some of us have to maybe get a little bit more creative. I'm having to basically find creativity in every part of my life, specifically for the functioning of this church. So it's something that I think some people have been talking about. I've received a lot of letters. And the only thing I can tell you is, for me, I cannot speak for you, but this place right here, right now, requires me to be here because there are people who need me. And when I say there are people who need me, I don't just stand alone, because what's behind me is a small little army of people who have been staying by the stuff just like me. I can't do it on my own, okay? God can call me and take me to wherever, but for this work, for this body of work, I can't do it alone. It requires people, and it requires people who understand why they're here, not just because things have turned a little sour in the state or things are a little tough. Trust me. Some of you who have families to support, mortgages to pay, and the list goes on. Now, you have yours and I have mine. I have to still figure out with God. This is not like I'm going to solve the problem. I can be a great steward, but God's got to do his part for things to kind of stay all together. So all I'm going to tell you is it's not a solution to say, well, I'm just going to pick up and I'm going to leave, because the first person who'd want to pick up and leave from the state is Pastor Scott. That's the easy thing to do. The hard thing to do is to stay where God has planted your feet and to see things through, because this valley cannot last here indefinitely. Now, let me just say this to you. It's long time for a change in the state of California, but the change can't come because the people running the state are so crooked. And, you know, many of you are like me. I signed a petition to recall both Newsom. Hey, I'm going to say it publicly. I could give a care. Really, I mean, there's so many more important things here to deal with. I signed those petitions to recall both Gascon and Newsom, like many of you did. We know that there were enough valid, bona fide signatures to oust both of them, but somehow magically that didn't happen. So this type of corruption can only be rooted out when the people of this state finally say we've had enough and demand things that we have not demanded. The people have not demanded. Tell me, you living here, any one of you in the sound of my voice, including me, have you asked for an audit? Because you can, as a citizen living in this state, just for the money that was designated for the special train. You remember that special train? Multi-million, now billion-dollar train to nowhere. Well, I can tell you what an audit would show. If there were 10 people in the room, 9 of those 10 people became super wealthy, And the one person who was the idiot followed along with the rest of the 9, thinking we're doing something for the state. This is the way corruption works here. Everybody is busy robbing and pilfering, and no problems get solved. We still have severe homelessness problem. We've got a transportation problem, that our roads are falling apart, full of potholes. I mean, the problems are unending, and the money, well, we're broke. We don't have any money in the state of California. That's your tax dollars, by the way, that are supposed to go for things, and they don't. So maybe if we as citizens who live in this state start saying we've had enough, collectively there might be a body that starts a movement that demands accountability, that starts to figure out that until we oust the thieves and the thugs and the charlatans that control and rule this state, we will stay in this state where corruption and drugs and you name it, it's just rampant and nobody seems to care. And in the midst of all this, you got people like myself and people like you in the congregation who are saying, how can I stay here? But I'm going to ask you the question, and it's a needful question because it really does apply to almost everything that you're going to encounter. What have you done, singularly, what have you done to try and solve the problem within the state? See, that's my problem, is that we're all complaining about the problem. We know the corruption and the impasse, but that's it. We've just said, okay, we've all resigned to the fact that there's corruption here, and things are not going to change until maybe we get a new administration, which will probably be the same as the current administration running the state. So all I'm saying to you is it might be time for some of us, I'm not a politician, and I sure as hell don't want to be one, but it might be time for some of us to really seriously think about if we love this state. I love living here. I love the state of California. I do not like what it has become. And it's going to get worse, by the way, when you have major retailers finally, because of the rampant crime, for example, in San Francisco, that beautiful downtown area basically is like a ghost town. The last holdout is, I believe, Macy's, which will be closing its doors if it hasn't already. And then you start going down the streets in San Francisco, go through Berkeley, go to Stockton, look at the north of our state, and don't think that that's not all going to spread down here. It will, until we, citizens, get to the point of saying enough. It's enough that crime cannot be stopped, not because we don't have good law enforcement, but their hands are tied because the DA doesn't support law enforcement. So you can just keep getting robbed out on the street and there's nothing to do about it. Just go home and stay inside. Until we start getting a little bit angry about this, and figuring out that citizens actually, we have power. I think we've succumbed to this and we've just kind of all gone into this, I just can't take it, but I'll just stay here. Until you get enough and you say, I've had enough. Now, what can we do? Now, I'm not a community activist, I'm not a political activist, nor am I an organizer, but there's got to be somebody in the sound of my voice who makes a decision that says, yeah, we can make change here, and it starts with people actually deciding to take back the state and take it out of the hands of the thieves. And you say, well, how do you do that? There are legal processes to do that. And you say, well, didn't we try that with trying to recall people? Yes, but that's not the only avenue. So I just say to you, for those people who are concerned, and I'm going to say it for me too, I haven't done all. I haven't done everything. Just like this church, I've told you the problems with this church, and I'm trying very much with God's word to solve the problems by opening up, showing, unfolding. If you care for something enough, you'll fight for it. I want to fight for this church. I think I love the state of California enough that I'd like to fight for it too, but as I said, I'm only one person. So until we figure this out here, for the people who are like me, constantly saying, gosh, how bad can it get? Really? Maybe it's time for us to really start doing things. And I say the top of the list is prayer, yes. But prayer won't solve the problem alone. Sorry to tell you that. So until we kind of get to the point of saying, yeah, we see there's a problem, and as I said, someone in the sound of my voice will take up the mantle. That I guarantee it, because there are enough people in this state who love this state and don't want to leave the state. But when every pressure, you know, some of you have seen even our gas prices. And we went down, I think the gas prices dropped down to somewhere around $5 again. It was, whoa, that's great. Yeah, from somewhere close to $7. Yeah, that's really great. Except if you look across the state, you're going to find gas somewhere across the state at about $2.50, $3. It's taxation. And when you know how much, by the way, you're paying for gas tax, there's all these little things that at some point you say, enough. And the people, by the way, of this country, same thing. People need to speak. I've said this before, you speak with your pocketbook. You don't support things that you don't agree with. Now, I think I'll leave that subject because I think I've said enough and I don't want to cut into too much of my speaking time. But last but not least, I'm going to leave you with, before we go to music, I'm going to leave you with a very delicious thought. Most of you by now have heard about the opening of the Olympic Games. Let me just tell you something. It's no wonder why that country has been overrun and overtaken. Not that I have any grievance for this, but the people of that country let it happen. It is overrun by Muslims who, in certain sectors of the country, demand Sharia law be enforced. There are quarters in some areas just outside of Paris where if your head is not covered as a woman, there are consequences. And this is mind-boggling that the government let that happen there. So, you know, let me just tell you something. Sometimes you can get a glimpse into the future of when people stay silent for too long. This is a perfect case in point. Some creative genius thought this was such a good idea to make a mockery out of the Last Supper, or at least some concept of it. And then you've got people like a Mitt Romney or a Jill Biden that just think it's so precious and creative. Well, I have issues with all of these people who are nothing but hypocrites. And that's all they are, that want to come out and tell you they've got great faith, how great Catholic and great Mormon and great everything, but yet it's okay to have your faith attacked and be made a mockery of. Well, this is why I said to you, this is what happens in places where people forget the importance of God. Because now that country is not only overtaken and overrun, but if you can even wrap your mind around this, you've got a very high Muslim population and you've got an incredibly high amount of gay people living there. And you don't think that there's going to be some mass problems in the future? Just think about what I'm saying. Punishment comes to those people. I know I just used a big word, but punishment comes to those people. You know, you want to live in tolerance? Then don't make a mockery of my faith, and I won't talk about you and your choices. All right? That's tolerance for me. But don't think that this happened in a vacuum. This happened because people were quiet and did not speak up. So I'm just telling you, pay attention. There will be consequences to this, but not the consequences of Christians being outraged, although there are people that are. The Olympic people took down all the videos from YouTube because enough people complained, but I'm sorry, that won't be enough. But I will tell you what the next chapter will look like for a country like France. And that is with the population having swung out of control, where it used to be predominantly Catholic and now it is Muslim. You are going to see some of the greatest clashes and violence. Not now, but in a few years from now, when that population starts to enforce their rules and their laws under the banner of it's their right to do so, while the citizens have just been quiet and just sheepishly gone along and not said a word. Figure it out, because we're going to have to battle the same fight here. And maybe some of us are not going to go quietly. See, the more noise we make, the right noise, that keeps a lot of things at bay. All you got to do, by the way, is look at certain countries in the world to see why are certain countries not giving way to this. Well, maybe it's because their leadership still recognizes certain things to be morally right or sound, or morally not right or not sound. And I can pick several countries off the top of my head that actually say, you can do whatever you want, but just don't do it in public. And you might say, well, isn't that hypocritical? No, that's saying we respect you, but the rule of law must stand, and respect for all people, all people's religion, not one group of people heralded as more important and the outliers of, we must herald them, they're heroes. I'm sorry. The only person who's going to be painted as a hero is the person who does not stand for the injustice of laws being broken, of our faith being made a mockery of, and of people just deciding that, you know what, it's all in good fun, let's just all appreciate it. No, I'm sorry, not me. And that's why I said to you, we can't stay quiet. So there are two groups of people. This ties back into what I said about California. You could just stay quiet and do nothing. Or if you care enough about something, you got to raise up your voice and let it be heard. And there are ways, proper ways to do that, to where if enough people do it, we can be the change in this state. And I'm sorry to tell you, but I think that there are more people here who want their state back than there are the people who are deranged to think the state needs to be going in the direction it's in. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes. So with that being said, I singularly can't fix the problems, but I'm not going to run away from them just yet. I'm going to give it a good shot, and I'm hoping that some of you in the sound of my voice will do likewise. Give it a good shot to say, I have done all in my stand here. And maybe when we've done that, God will enter in and, you know, listen, the best thing that could happen is, well, let me see, I've got some scenarios here, but the best thing that could happen is we get our state back, and it's restored to what once was probably, I think, one of the most beautiful states in the Union. So until we get to that point, as I said, I'm not running away. I can't tell you what to do, but I'm going to exercise faith and courage to see if we can't see this thing through and turn the ship around, not just Faith Center, the state of California, just as much as our country. And like I said, if you really think about it, things that mean something to you are worth fighting for. And those are not words just to flap the mouth and make sounds, but actually think about it. Those that stay silent, well, you know who you are. And that's all I have to say about that.
To this house, magnify the Lord, lift up holy hands, our hearts in one accord, worship and bow down before Him, exalt His name today. Come into this house,